So I'm Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. And today, since there's a lot of interest in Smith revolvers, I want to cover the N frame, specifically the 44, because if I'm going to do the history of the 38 N frame, it's going to be a lot more stuff to cover. So we're going to cover basically the 44 and touch on one of the 45 ACP models. And so the 44, which we all know is a Dirty Harry gun, its roots started back in, I always saw 1906. The books I'm looking at say 1907, but I think the ideas were all put together in 06. And it followed the I frame and the K frame in design, but Smith wanted to come big because it was their first hand ejector, swing out cylinder, large caliber. I mean, they had the Schofield, but this is now a swing out cylinder, and they wanted to come out big. And so their design engineers got a little carried away, and they came out with, oh boy, I need to thank these people here first. I have two triple locks here, a 1917 with an incredible history, and I borrowed these from some of my shooting partners, 44 seconds, HE seconds. I just want to get that out of the way. Thanks, guys, for loaning me your guns. I might want to mention, this guy said you need to handle it with white gloves, and I said I don't want to do that, I'll get beat up. So we'll wipe it down with the silicone cloth when I'm done. But at any rate, this is a triple lock, or gold seal, or they had three names for them. Triple lock, gold seal. It'll come to me. Anyway, it had a lock in the center as well as up front. And you know how the normal front lock works. You have the little piston up here. Well, it's a two-piece part, and it goes like that. And there's a second piston up here. It works off the same spring. So it locks at the end of the rod. It locks at the center in the frame, and it locks in the back, called the triple lock. The American people loved it. It worked well as a commercial gun. It survived for years without any criticism. And then the Brits had some converted and made in 450 Boxer and 455 Ely, I believe, for World War I. We were shipping them over there in 1914 or 1915. A number of them went over there, thousands. And they were complaining that it was over-engineered, and with all the locks, the three locking positions and the tight tolerances, that when they got dropped and when they got dirty, they didn't want to work. And so this is right here a service model. So it's got a fixed sight. And this is a 5-inch, great barrel length to have. It's really neat. But it's notable here to see that there is a triple lock target. If you knew how rare these guns are, how expensive they are, you wouldn't believe that I have one in this video here. But anyway, this one is as new, like mint, a triple lock target model. But at any rate, so they had to do something about them not being serviceable for military type stuff. And right away in 1915, they came out with the second model. They knocked out the shroud underneath the barrel. They knocked out the center lock, and they simplified the gun. And everybody loved them. And they were used extensively. This is a service model. This is a second model target. It has the adjustable sight and the partridge front sight. Great stuff. This one, notably, the service model, has a Smith and Wesson grip adapter on it. And it's a set of steel plates that go underneath the grip. And then they lay over the frame. And if you have, the high grips, there's going to be a gap. But so if you have the service grips that just go into the opening here, then it'll look right on the gun. They have a screw down the center that you pull together, and there's a rubber piece in here. And what it does is it moves your hand down on the gun so your finger is straight to the trigger rather than reaching down. It straightens you out, fills the grip. And it's kind of like a very early Packmeyer, Hogue, etc., etc., etc. You'll notice all those grips fill this area. The aftermarket grips fill this area. And so this is the second model, 1915 through 1940. Along comes 1926, and Wolf and Clark, big distributor of Smith revolvers, says, we want the underlug back. Put it back on the gun. The rest is fine, but people want the protection of the rod with the underlug here. And they did. And I don't have a third model here. I thought I did, but we went ahead, we were playing this, we're just going to do it without a third model. So you're going to have to imagine the underlug here. And that would be the Wolf and Clark model or the 1926. And they made them simultaneously till World War II. They made both, the Model 2, second model, and the Model 3, or the Wolf and Clark. And distributors demanding the factory do things, it's happened over the years. There were a couple others, I think Lou Horton and John Jovino were clamoring to get the short-barreled Smith and Wessons, which a lot of people collect. And they had to offer to buy like 1,000 of them or 2,000 of them, and Smith finally said, "All right, we'll make them." So there's John Jovino's, and there's Lou Horton's, just like the Wolf and Clark. So that was an early example. Probably the first example of demanding a gun be made would be the Beaker 22 Target in 1908 or 9. So that sort of gets us up to World War II. These are long actions. All these have the long action on the short action that we all know today, and the action after 1946 with the safety bar in it is what we all know. But these long actions that they called them, they had enough left over of these that between 46, when they went back to commercial lines, and 49, they still they put them together and sent them out, but they had to do it with the safety bar. And so there are end frame hammers that are long action hammers that are cut for the safety bars. There had to be a cutaway in the hammer in order for it to slip up into that place. So there were 3 years of those hammers. Along about 10 years ago, a guy whose father owned a distributor for a Dodge distributorship back east. It was the very first one. You can look it up. Very first Dodge distributor. I can't remember. I think 1912. Anyway, his distributor got closed with the downsizing of GM, and he went on to work on their 10-cylinder muscle car, whatever that coupe was. It came out in the late 90s, I think, somewhere in the 90s. Anyway, he sends me a gun with the hammer broke off, and he says, and I didn't know anything about this stuff, he says he wants the hammer replaced. I said, no problem, get you a long action hammer. A lot of people have them, we'll find one. And so I got one, and they sent it in, and he had a 46 through 49 long action hammer cut for the safety bar. And so when I tried to put it in there, of course, it didn't work. And I was miffed, and I'm looking at it, and I had no clue what I was looking at. I had to adapt. I looked at his hammer, and I looked at this hammer and tried to figure out, and I saw the cutout on his hammer, so I laid them over each other, scratched the line, took a cut-off wheel and went in there, because not a lot of cutters are going to cut this stuff. Used the cut-off wheel, went in there and cut it out of the way, got it in the gun, and was happy as could be. But what were the chances that somebody was going to bring me a hammer that was cut for those 3 years that I was going to have to replace? It's kind of fun. One of the things people run into when they work on these things. Leave their door open for people to come in. So that covers up till 49, and they used up the last of the long actions. So that was the third model, had the underlug, made from 46 to 49. And then from 50, they said, all right, we're going to move the pivot point on the hammer, make the short action, the short throw action in there with the safety bar. And that was the fourth change. And that was 1915. They made two, just like these, service model, which later became the Model 21, and the adjustable sight model with the sight they used after the war, called the sort of pre-24, which morphed into the pre-24. So they called them the military target and the military service, but we all know them as the 21-24 today. Great stuff. That was number 4. I'm not going to cover the ACP models through the 50s. It's a lot of material in there, and the 45 Colt models. But I am going to skip to the 44 Magnum, the Dirty Harry Special. Boy, they sold a lot of those guns after his movie, but they were well on their way to success before. In 1956, Remington and Elmer Keith got together again and created the 44 Remington Magnum. Original name, it's Remington Magnum. So when I log them in at my store, I put 44R. That's how I log them into my store. When this model came out, it was the 44 Magnum. They didn't have model numbers yet. This is a pre-model number gun. It's 1956. And so the name, the designation that he gave to it was the NT-430, end-frame target 430 bore. I always wondered why they just didn't call it a 43. I guess the name didn't sound right. From the beginning, it was a 429, and they just called it a 44. But this is the NT-430. And so it's easy to tell the first year guns, real easy. They have what's called the ladybug or 5th screw, top side plate screw, lots of names for it. It's this little round screw at the top of the side plate. For my birthday, September 56, they gave the orders to drop the top screw, and they went to the side plate with the dimple where it goes in, comes down, and 1, 2, 3, screw it in. But at first they had the screw up here, like on all the pre-war stuff as well. And so that was a change that happened the first year. And so to see a first year gun is a real wonderful thing. What am I going to cover on this gun? This gun was delivered as a blue 4-inch, blue 6-inch, 6.5-inch, and it was sent back to the factory because the 6 and 4-inch barrels were available at first, and the 8-inch barrels were available later. And so they had an 8-inch barrel put on it, had it factory nickel plated, and then ordered the smoothies presentations. They match across the bottom, the grain. And so they had the smoothies put presentation grips, a nickel, and a longer barrel. And on the back of the cylinder, there's a star, and that indicates large parts changed or refinished or both. And so this is a factory nickel gun, just not when it was made. November 61, they got rid of the front screw up here. And this screw has a plunger behind it and a spring that work your cylinder stop. And what they did in 61 is they got rid of this. They were trying to save money. They saved the threading, the hole, the plunger, and the screw, and they just tucked the spring in inside the gun, inside the frame. And then they gutted the cylinder stop. They made a tunnel in it for the spring, so the spring had lots of room to work. Prior to that, the plunger just laid against the outside of the part with the spring behind it, trapped by the screw. That's a 1956 with a lot of history to it. This is a 1959. This was my dad's gun. How it survived, I'll never know. We were nuts. I wasn't Elmer Keith, but I was careless, and I don't recommend anything I'm about to say. My dad lived vicariously through me. I think he wanted to shoot more, and he had me to go out and do shooting. So he would always say, yeah, there's plenty of ammo over there. Take it with you and go out and shoot the guns. And finally we went up to a department store, Smitty's department store, a mile from our house. And they had the big box in there with the RCBS, Rock Chucker. I think it's before the Junior came out, I don't know. And it had the book, the mechanical powder measure, and all the different things you needed to reload. And then we bought some dies. I think he got a set of dies with it and brought it home. And he wanted me reloading. He wanted to, have all that going on in his garage late at night, drinking beer, smoking cigarettes in front of gunpowder, everything wrong. Anyway, I always went into the book and I looked for the very fastest load, as I was young and crazy. And I think I found a load in the Spear number 9 manual for 1502 feet per second. And that was the fastest one I could find. And I think it was the 180 grain Sierra with 296 powder and 26.5 grains of powder. And so I thought, well, I guess we're going to start at 28. That's going to be safe and fine. But as we were loading them and my compadres were laughing and talking about what we were doing, I thought, well, why not load some at 30? And then if that seems all right, we'll load another 10 or 12 at 32. 32 grains at 296 in this gun, you had to have a plan for the gun, because when you touched it off, it was going somewhere. I don't care how tough you are, that gun was going to travel. Maybe Bubba Smith could have held on to it, but we were all 150 pounds back then, and I had a system where I would just kind of turn my head and let it come back, and it worked well. And a buddy of mine I waited tables with named Brian, he wanted to shoot it with the hot loads, and he had this thing where he would bring the gun down like that, and he put his finger on the trigger, and it went off about right there, and it came back and clocked him in the head hard. I took the gun from him because he was bleeding, didn't want blood on the gun, and we dipped his shirt in the cooler and wiped his face off, and he lived. Told him to walk it off. 20 years later, he comes in the story, and I'm looking at him. I gave him a bottle of water. I'm looking a little closer at him like that. 20 years later, I could see those two little lines in his head where that rear sight planted itself. I mean, you had to be there. I didn't laugh. I didn't even say anything. But 20 years later, that 29 had left an impression on his forehead that was still there. Getting by the funny stuff, I did leave one out because I didn't want to cover originally. I didn't want to cover any of the calibers. But this is hard to give up. This is a 1917, also on loan to me. This is an impressive little 1917. Not only is it in great shape, must have been in an officer's holster, but it has a coin attached to the bottom, to a chain. And it's a French 1918 coin, which I guess somebody in the service over in France grabbed this coin and brought it back with him and had a jeweler attach it and make this chain for it. But it's so impressive. He has a story that goes with it, but I don't want to over embellish it. These guns, the U.S. military told Smith and Wesson they wanted some revolvers made for World War I, but they wanted them made in 45 ACP. And it's a rimless cartridge. It has an extractor groove, but not a rim that extends beyond the body of the case. And so they came up with these little half moon clips that hold 3 rounds, and you drop them in there, and the 2 of them, and you'd be able to eject them and load 2, and you'd get 3 rounds with every load. Wonderful little system, worked well. Military bought 163,000 of these. They're a great collectible. If you're a Smith collector, you should have one in your stable. Something I want to pass on. We had a great shooter named Bud at the National Guard Armory in the early to mid 80s, and I saw him do a lot of things, impressive things. But the one thing that I learned from him, he could load fast, and he loved to shoot from a concealed or carry position. He didn't use speed equipment and blinders and all that stuff. He used his street guns, and he competed pretty damn well. When there was 150 shooters, he always placed well. He would load the deuces. They make these that only hold 2. And he claimed he would put, as his starting load, he would put 3 deuces in there. And he said that ejected better, ejected faster, and it was easier to eject. And I've timed for the guy, and he would open it and he'd eject them over his shoulder and then come and do his load. But that's just a little bit of information for people that use these moon guns, that if you use 3 the first time, Bud says they move out faster. And I watched the guy shoot. He was so good that at a South Mountain match once, I beat him, and I followed him out to the parking lot telling him how happy I was that I beat him, and he thought I was insulting him. I was being honest, I was so happy that I beat Bud, I wanted to go talk to him about it. There was another thing that I saw him do, and this is a total sidebar, but it's worth hearing. An attorney named Howard was standing next to me, and we're watching Bud. He's on the line with his carry equipment, you know, little carry holster, whatever, 1911. He comes up and he goes blam, 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 and he moves to his second position. He goes for his load, and he goes blam, click. And I watched him do his tap, rack. I mean, he was like a machine. He came back up and tried to fire again, and they locked the slide back, noticed that there wasn't a follower around, tilted the gun up, put his little finger in there, hit the switch, pulled that magazine out so quick we didn't even know what happened. I could see it sliding out on the ground next to him. Pulled out another magazine, dropped it in there, hit the slide release, and went right back to business. That guy lost 2 seconds doing that, and he had to practice that a lot. He may have learned some of that technique at Gunsight, but it was worth mentioning. And so another thing worth mentioning, I don't get paid to promote any item, but if you're going to have a 1917 and you don't have one of these Mooners, BMT Mooner tool, you're missing out. We used to take them in and out, and back in the early 80s with a screwdriver or a wood dowel, and people's fingers were bleeding. This is an amazing tool. Find yourself one if you have a 1917. I think that's about all. I did thank all the people that brought me guns. Impressive stuff. So if you have any questions, and I plan on covering the end frame 38 cal, but that's all. That's a whole bunch of information all in itself. So I didn't try to load the two up at the same time. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm looking forward to doing more.